This is the Gold channel of All India Radio. In the weekly program Money Talk, we now bring you a discussion on impact on global economy by COVID-19. The participants are Jayant Roy Chaudhary, economic analyst, and Prakash Chawla, journalist.
Coronavirus, which has originated from China, is mainly concentrated in China, has claimed about 1,700 lives and has done infection to something like 70,000 people in China. And China, being the second largest economy of the world, is feeling its impact not only on the health of its people but its economy as well. But it is not China alone. Since China has huge integration with the rest of the world, and so is the rest of the global economy, so this problem, because after all, virus impacts movement of people, movement of goods, entire system. So it is creating a lot of scare, not only from the health point of view, but also from the point of view of the impact on the economy. In any case, the global economy wasn't in the best of the shapes. Even the Indian economy also has been witnessing slowdown, and the hope was that we'll bottom out from the slowdown. And now we have a new problem. So the government has been at a very high level doing a lot of review meetings, and today Finance Minister Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman held a review meeting with the industry bodies trying to see and gauge the impact of the supply chain on specific industries like manufacturing, automobile, pharma, besides the travel and trade. So going forward, what kind of concerns do you see, Jayanto?
I see the biggest concern being to global growth, of course. Global growth, as you know, Prakash, had been bottoming out for the last several quarters. We had seen the worst in the quarter ended December 31st, but it seems that is not so. At least this quarter is certainly going to be very, very bad. Not only for China, but for all economies, because virtually every economy in the world is integrated with the Chinese economy. Of course, the major advanced economies like USA, Europe are, of course, going to be hit. So are resource-based economies like Canada and Australia, as well as Indonesia and Nigeria, which used to depend on the Chinese for a lot of things, including selling their crude and their gas and their minerals to these countries, to China. They're all going to be hit. So will India. Now, what is the impact? According to Moody's, Chinese economy will grow by 5.2%. G20 will have a slashing down of growth from 2.8 to 2.4. Now, that is all bad news. How long can we expect an end to this? Obviously, all diseases have a shelf life. It cannot go on and go on forever. If the pandemic goes beyond this quarter, then it would really be very serious. But hopefully there will be a medicine which will be brought out, like in the case of the SARS, similar disease SARS, which happened a decade or more back. But in the short run, what we will really see is disruptions, in the supply chain for automobiles. China is one of the biggest suppliers for automobiles and automobile parts, and every country is going to be impacted, including India, which does depend a lot on China, not only for automobiles, but especially for electric vehicles. India's other major failing will be the APIs that we import for our pharmaceuticals industry. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is going to be really hit. Its stock of APIs is going to be limited. Already certain manufacturers are feeling the pinch, and there is a slowdown in production of certain basic medicines. This may increase as months go by, and if supplies continue to be similarly stopped.
So the API, which is the essential raw material for our generic medicine, is going to impact not only the domestic supply chain, but drugs and pharmaceutical is one of the major items in India's export basket, which means that there is a concern that this API disruption, if it really takes place on going forward, could also have decelerating impact on our exports of pharma.
Absolutely. API will have its impact, so will your automobile parts shortage and electronics parts shortage for that matter. Apple has announced that it is going to cut down its production and sales of iPhone, mainly because its inventory from China will be stopped. The other problem is that if you have a slower global growth, then the demand for India's three biggest sales from abroad, gems and jewelry, handloom and handicrafts, and textiles is going to be hit.
And engineering. Because the entire automobile
chain is going to be hit. Everything is going to be hit.
And then we have China being the major user of metals. And we export a lot of metals.
Yes, but we are actually not that big a player in the metals market of late, mainly because the amount of iron ore that China used to import from us has gone down, mainly because Chinese steel industry is going through a restructuring phase. They are trying to reduce the amount of steel that they manufacture. So they no longer need our ore as much as they used to earlier. The prices of ore have also softened. But yes, overall, there will be obviously reduction in the iron ore exports. as well as other metals that China buys from us. But China, luckily for us, we were not one of the major suppliers of minerals to China. Though for our trade it was a major amount with China, but otherwise for China it was a very insignificant amount. They are actually much more dependent on Africa and Australia and on Brazil for that matter rather than on us.
But there are industries which are immediately would be feeling the impact, especially the travel, tourism, and India obviously depends overwhelmingly on its services sector.
Travel and tourism expectations have been lowered and lowered significantly because this quarter is going to be very bad. Many airlines have totally stopped their China flights. Many other airlines have stopped flights to destinations which are no longer so economic. Airports, which are major revenue earners for almost every country, especially the smaller countries like Singapore, UAE, etc., are reporting reduced footfall, reduced sales in their duty-free shops, reduced usage of hotel rooms. Hotel vacancies have shot up in holiday destinations. Consequently, while that's a boon for those who want to have a holiday right now, it means that the hotel industry is going to be really hit. Hotel and tourism globally are big grossers, so that's going to impact the global economy in a big way. For India, of course, hotel and tourism is not that big a grosser, but nevertheless, it's a significant driver, especially in terms of employment. So therefore, the impact is going to be felt in these sectors, which is going to be quite significant in an era where already India has lost a large number of jobs, and in an era where there is a slowdown happening in any case in India for a variety of reasons, including the fallout of demonetization, the continued impact, as well as a slowdown in bank lending, fall in rural consumption. All these factors are being aggravated by the coronavirus problem. So you can say that India will suffer much more than many other countries in the world. The global slowdown that we are witnessing right now, which has been accentuated by coronavirus, will be felt in a much more severe manner by the Indian economy, not because coronavirus is hitting us as much, but because we are already going through a slowdown phase.
Now the question arises, how do we deal with it? To some extent, Indian economy is largely perceived to be domestically driven. Our integration is quite significant with the rest of the world. But supposing we were to find a solution, take for instance tourism and travel. Now obviously we'll have the impact from the global travelers here, inbound and outbound. But what if can a solution be found that in this period we promote domestic tourism as an interim kind of a solution? Likewise, we try and improve the domestic consumption so that we immediately tackle this issue.
Of course, Prakash, what you are saying is common logic, and I think that is the best way to go forward. But few problems there. Firstly, we haven't really taken too many steps to improve consumption. Few steps have been taken in this budget, but possibly we need to spend much more in infrastructure if we really want to increase employment and thereby boost consumption. And now that will possibly call for a bigger fiscal expansionary policy, which may not be feasible at this point of time given the revenue implications that we already have. Already we have given away a lot of tax. We have gone in for a number of tax cuts, so that might not be possible. Can we grow domestic tourism? Yes, the answer to any kind of global problem is to increase your domestic market. You're right, but can we grow it in this age when coronavirus is spreading? It's a fact. There have been reports of coronavirus, at least in some of our major tourism markets, including Kerala. I would feel that the fear of a virus epidemic will keep away holidaymakers. It may not stop business travel, but it will certainly hit it, and there are already initial reports suggesting as much. The other problem is that we are integrated far more globally today than we were in 2008-9 when the Wall Street crash happened. In today's date, foreign trade actually accounts for 44% of our GDP. Now that's a huge amount of money. Even if we were able to give a boost to 66% of our economy, we will still have problems with the rest of the 44% that is contributed to our GDP.
Let me come back to cushions that we need to talk about, because there's a problem. So what are cushions that we have in Indian economy? Luckily, we have good chunk of forex reserves in excess of $450 billion reserves. Then we have a huge market. Only thing is, it becomes all the more imperative for us to somehow improve the domestic consumption and even the services exports. Because what happens in a typical situation like epidemic, outbreak, then we have this problem of goods movement. But when it comes to service exports, software exports, can we try and make up the loss that we might get in, say, goods trade? And can we make up some loss by domestic consumption, which is almost imperative now. What else can you do?
There's not much that you can do. Can we make up for the loss by increasing our services trade? Yes, we can. That is a good initiative. Of course, the world will resist much more of software exports if we want to do that. But nevertheless, that is the only route that we have open. We have to increase our domestic consumption, whichever route we follow, fiscal expansionary policy or a policy of inviting more foreign direct investment. Whichever route we follow, we have to create more jobs in the country so that there is a spread of income and there is a kind of holistic approach towards both income generation as well as employment, creating its own demand forces. That, of course, is a given imperative. How soon can we do it is difficult because these are things which cannot be done overnight. Coronavirus is an immediate thing. It's going to affect us for at least 1 quarter, if not a little more. So can we really offset the entire effect of coronavirus that will be there on our economy and on the global economy? No, we cannot. So we will have to bear it and grin to a certain extent. But yes, can we look forward to a better deal in the quarters to come? I would imagine so. Personally speaking, I would feel that the slowdown in the Indian market had bottomed out by the quarter ending December 31st. The coronavirus would possibly mean that this quarter will also be not so great. But after that, I would imagine things would start improving. Because once your consumer demand has bottomed out, there is only one way to go, and that is up. How fast can we recover? That is the basic question today. The speed of recovery will really depend upon the policy initiatives taken by the government, because this is a fragile economy period where policy initiatives will count. What are the policy initiatives that we take to reform our economy, to attract foreign direct investment, to help our economy grow by creating jobs, by creating more infrastructure? Those are the initiatives which people will be looking out for, which the world will be looking out for, from what will still continue to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Because China's growth is forecast to be 5.2% and we are forecast still to be growing at 5.4% if we take Moody's into account. If that is so, then we are still a little better off than China. And being one of the major economies in the world, the 5th or the 6th, whichever way you look at it, our growth is still going to be a major attraction for the global economy.
What happens is that hopefully this coronavirus subsides after a few weeks, and once it's done with it, then obviously it would have left a crippling impact on China's economy. In that kind of a scenario, do you see investors change their perception about the economic power of China and then new kind of thought process towards India?
Well, India has been trying to be a backup supply chain. Unfortunately for us, Vietnam and Cambodia have proven to be more attractive destinations, but we will certainly get some of the investments that do not go to China in the future. But there is another problem. The problem, Prakash, is that a lot of economists and a lot of businessmen have started thinking that there is a limit to globalization. So they want to put caps on global supply chains. They are now talking not in terms of autarky, which is where you do trade only with yourself, but limiting foreign trade, limiting global supply chains. If that idea catches on, then all of us are in a little bit of trouble as far as FDI flows are.
What about Assemble in India initiative?
But Assemble in India initiative, again, is something which will succeed only if you are able to keep the global supply chain intact. Again, where China is, till date, the key player. If you assemble in India, you are actually assembling for a third place, which would ideally be Africa, which is nearest to you. We have to try and backward integrate as fast as possible. Say in the case of pharmaceuticals, we have to try and see to it that the API industry in India, which is at a nascent stage, actually grows. We cannot depend on nascent, just imports all the time. At the same time, we cannot say we will remain aloof from the global supply chain.
What about the stock market?
Well, the stock market is the first to react, and they have already reacted pretty negatively. The New York Stock Exchange, the S&P, has fallen by a large extent. Let us not talk about our stock markets, which are driven not only by global trends but also by Indian trends. S&P is the bellwether. This has been one of the worst years for the S&P since 2009. If the global slowdown continues and the coronavirus, both of them continue, the only bright spot that we have is because of China's supply problems, because of its industrial problems, the prices of crude are going to remain soft. And that is a good point for us.
Hopefully the China virus threat subsides. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on impact on global economy by COVID 2019. The participants were Jayant Roy Chaudhary, economic analyst, and Prakash Chawla, journalist. This program is produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on the News on AIR app for updates.